Something we've seen a lot of recently is portable handheld PCs. Seems like everyone's having a go at making one, but with so many options, brands are having to try harder than ever to stand out from the crowd, with the likes of ASUS, Valve, MSI and many others already playing into the market. And well, more on the way. But today sees Antec take a shot at it with the release of their Core HS. And like others we've seen, they're trying to do something a bit different. But before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video's sponsor.
I'm never going to be an esports gamer. I never get any kills.
I wouldn't be so sure of that.
Is that Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com?
Yes, my son. It is me, Andy Raffel from eTeknix.com.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to bestow upon you a gift that will transform you into a true gamer. With a 24.5-inch Full HD screen, 240Hz refresh rate, 0.5 millisecond response time, AMD FreeSync Premium, and height adjustability, you'll be gaming in the big leagues in no time.
Oh, thank you.
No problem, my son. Why don't you check out the link in the description below to find out more.
Ever since the launch of the very successful Steam Deck from Valve, which is arguably the most successful gaming handheld in the market, we've seen many companies try to emulate their success, from ASUS, Lenovo, MSI, XPG and more. There's a lot of devices on the market that all offer a different flavour of the same theme, and the Antec HS looks set to be no exception. The thing that was, I guess, immediately interesting about this device is that it's technically not even an Antec product. It's actually an AONEO device. AONEO are a Chinese company founded back in 2020, and while you may not have heard of them, they have been pretty active and successful in this market with, well, these types of devices, and other similar products tailored towards retro gaming handhelds, with, I guess, the only issue being that they never had a presence in the Western market, but that is all about to change. So I'll be honest, this isn't really the Antec Core HS, it's actually the AONEO slide, and that's no secret either, as the AONEO logo is even printed on the back of the device. Now, this isn't merely Antec taking a product not well known here in the West, slapping their name and reputation on it and presenting it to a new market, which is a pretty common practice in tech industries, but instead is actually a collaboration effort between Antec and AONEO to bring this product to the Western market. And you know what? That all makes sense, as it's something that I guess Chinese-based companies wouldn't have been able to do themselves. So after what I can only imagine being many lengthy discussions and boardroom meetings, the Antec Core HS was born. It's the same product, but for a different audience, and that's not something either company is shy about, as this could potentially open up doors for collaborations in the future. Now, when we spoke to Antec at Computex, which is when they first unveiled this, they seemed pretty excited about what this could mean for the two companies if this is successful, and also talking about the future, as they made it very clear that, well, they had a vision and had huge plans for the next iterations of the device. It also means we're getting a product that's already been proven in the market, a different market admittedly, but it's been sold, played, tested and loved already. So I guess that's a positive start and already puts Antec on the front foot, at least compared to some of the competition. Now, when we went to Computex and we saw Antec, it gave us our first time getting hands-on with the device. And like many others who attended, we were, well, suitably impressed with what we saw. And we actually have a full video from Computex where we looked at it and had an interview with kind of Antec themselves. And again, you could tell the excitement level surrounding it from the staff was, well, extremely high. So I definitely advise checking that video out after you watch this one to see our first kind of initial impressions. Of course though, with it being such a massive event, it was hard for us to get a full idea of what it's like to actually use, as well, we'd have to spend hours with it to get to know what it's really like. And I even actually cheekily asked if we could take one home to use on the plane, but instead we had to wait, which is where we're at today. Now, in terms of the name, it's quite a simple one, Core HS, which denote what the device does. It has a hinge and it slides, HS. And after sitting there aimlessly, sliding it up and down and tilting it back and forth, it's actually pretty forgiving and it feels like it would stand the test of time, showing that the quality is definitely something that's been focused on by Antec. So moving over to the specs, because this is quite a key important one. The Core HS uses a Ryzen 7 7840U, a mobile processor that features 8 cores and 16 threads that can boost up to a maximum of 5.1 GHz, and also features fairly robust integrated graphics that will be the main source of our gaming power. Now, there are multiple SKUs, but this really does depend on the region you're in. As I know, in the UK at least, they are bringing one model in, which is what we have here in both black or white. It features 2TB of expanded storage, so there really isn't any concern of not being able to store your games. But if you do happen to want to add more storage, it does support adding a single-sided 4TB 2280 NVMe SSD, which is pretty significant compared to something like the Steam Deck, which only supports up to 2230 size drives, which are also typically more expensive, and on top of that, you can insert a microSD for even further expansion of storage. Now it also has 32GB of 7500MHz LPDDR5X memory, though it is clocked at 6400MHz for stability. Though a firmware update to unlock more speed is available, and this is something you just, wouldn't get on other devices. Again, depending on your region, this may differ, but for the UK, that's what you're getting. Now, something else that is improved on compared to Valve's Steam Deck is the screen, where Valve uses a 1280 by 800p resolution panel. The Core HS actually uses a much more detailed 1920 by 1080 resolution, but it is a bit smaller than the Steam Deck screen, coming in at 6 inches instead of Valve's 7 inches or 7.4 on the OLED model, which means that the pixel density of the screen is significantly higher at 368 pixels per inch, resulting in a much crisper looking display overall. And then couple that with 400 nits brightness and a 120% sRGB color gamut, it looks like it ticks all the right boxes. And with the fact that the screen not only slides but hinges towards you, the viewing angles are actually spot on. Now, there is a trade-off with the screen, I'll be honest, as the refresh rate is a bit lower compared to the competition, with the Steam Deck utilising a 90Hz panel while the Core HS taps out at 60Hz. Which seems like a fair trade-off for the increased resolution, as me personally, I prefer quality more than refresh rate on something like this anyway. Plus, the increase in resolution is going to put more demand on the components, so also having a higher refresh rate may be a bit of a hard push in terms of performance and battery life. And this is something Antec were keen to talk about. Obviously, game dependent, your battery life will differ, but they wanted their device to be higher than the competition. And they saw that having a 60Hz refresh rate was the way to do it. And I'm all for it when thinking about travelling and not having access to somewhere to charge it. Though, I guess through USB-C, you do have at least options, including the ability of utilising a power bank, for instance, to fuel that 46.2 watt-hour battery, which equates to about 12,000 milliamp hours. But even then, depending on the game, you should be getting about 4 hours worth of battery life, which is better than the competition. Finally, and this is the big one, but the Core HS comes with Windows 11 pre-installed, which means this could be used as a desktop if you really wanted to, especially when in docked mode, which is something we'll come back to soon. But it also means that games and software support in general is extremely good, as it's literally just Windows 11, just like a laptop or a desktop PC. It also has a fingerprint reader which acts as a power button, making logging into Windows much easier without the need for putting in your password or PIN number every single time. Now, before we actually move on to talk about using the device, which I'm sure you're eager to see, we should talk a little bit about what comes included with the Core HS, where, what it's like to hold in your hands, how the controls feel, and all of that. And I guess, this is the big one. So to start with the packaging, I must admit, I actually love the way it looks. Antec has gone with a modern retro vibe with the design, with the whole thing being designed to look a bit like a VHS box, with matching graphics, even paying attention to printing on the inside of the box. And me personally, I love that just finer attention to detail, as, first and foremost, it just looks really, really cool. Now on the inside, we find the Core HS itself, obviously with all the usual documentation and the charger, which does come with a host of regional adapters to suit whatever country you live in, or potentially that you may be traveling to, because with this type of device, it's probably likely that you will be traveling across the world and taking it with you. Of course, it's Type-C anyway, so using any chargers or power banks you have laying around will keep you gaming for longer. So in terms of the accessories, rather than being sent in the same box, this is likely to give consumers a choice, so they can obviously buy the device maybe without the bundle, or if they're just looking at buying the bundle separately. I don't quite know Antec's kind of reasoning behind it, but free stuff is always good. Now this bundle, again, which is region specific as I said, I know the whole of Europe is getting it, but I'd like to think the rest of the world is going to carry on. And it does come with a carry case that looks like this, and it's obviously pretty important if you plan to use this on the go, a glass screen protector which we've already put on there, and they are surprisingly easy to install, a set of joystick caps, like this, and then it comes with a dock, which allows the functionality to be extended even further from what it can already do. And it's actually very, very simple to do. You just place the Core HS in the dock, and you can simply use it as a Windows device, hooking up a keyboard, mouse, other peripherals, and a desktop display. And then you're ready to rock. This could be, I guess, especially handy if you want something to game on while traveling, but also have something to do your work on when you get to where you're going. The dock also gives you extra storage through a micro SD and SD slot on the side, along with USB Type-C and Type-A ports, HDMI and Ethernet. And the Core HS simply connects onto the Type-C dock and away you go. Though one personal gripe I have is how it's not branded Antec, but I really am just being picky at this point. So with all the bits and pieces out of the way, it's time to actually start using the Core HS. And for that, I took home the black one and sent Brandon home with the white one to test it out and give our thoughts. Now when it came to using Windows, it was, well, pretty much what you'd expect. There was no real issue with it, but you do have to wonder just how much thought went into the designing of Windows for use with a touchscreen and a controller, because it, well, doesn't quite work as effortlessly as when you use a mouse. But of course, you could just, well, use a mouse. The functionality for that is there if you want it. And I guess that's the beauty of it. It has Bluetooth. Connect up a device like a mouse and off you go. Or you can use the dock and just plug it in wired. Now, something I did find that was, I guess, a little bit niggly was that Windows defaulted to using 175% for its scaling. And this didn't really work well, and I actually had to change it down to 125%. The reason it didn't work well wasn't just because of eyesight or anything like that, it's because a lot of the programs that we were using just weren't displaying properly. With the go-to example being the storage manager within Steam, where you could see some of the window, but the bottom with the controls was, well, actually cut off. So if you do get one of these, bear in mind that you may want to change the scaling to make Windows, I guess, more usable. Though this is likely Windows thinking it knows best and implementing this based on resolution and screen size. So I can't really be too overcritical to Antec on this one. And I'm pretty happy actually blaming Microsoft. So there we go. Now, in terms of gameplay testing, we did try a variety of games with a variety of different play styles. So the main one for me was going to be a racing game, so Forza Horizon 5, but then there was a few others that we decided internally that we wanted to look at. So the full list is Forza Horizon 5, Monster Hunter World, Apex Legends, Blasphemous, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Elden Ring, and Lords of the Fallen. I feel that this list has actually given us a great sort of idea as to different types of games and how that would appeal to people who are maybe used to a controller-based device or just using a controller with their PC or console. Now, it may be clear to you that the vast majority of these games are designed, I guess, to be better suited for a controller, perhaps with the exception of Apex Legends on PC, albeit it's a game with great kind of controller support and crossplay. So we wanted to try it anyway. FPS as well is always a fun one to try on a device like this. Sadly, that did come with some issues, as we wanted to see if we could make use of the gyro control capabilities of the Core HS to make aiming easier. However, we were unfortunately kind of unable to get it working properly, and to be, well, perfectly transparent here, I'm not sure what that comes down to. Whether the control software needs an update to better integrate the feature, or perhaps it's an issue with Steam. The game just seemed to have trouble recognizing that it was an option at all. Whatever the case, it didn't really work out, but that could be, and I don't want to admit this, user error. So take our experience at least with that with a grain of salt, and perhaps we'll update you on this in the future if we manage to find a fix. Now, when it came to aiming, shooting, and just generally moving around, it felt exactly as you would expect. But for myself, as a keyboard and mouse FPS player, it did take a while to get used to. And that's, I guess, no discredit to the Core HS, it's just a personal preference and, well, an issue that I generally find with all handheld PCs, including the Steam Deck. Now, if you're already, I guess, more accustomed to playing FPS games with a controller, then in all honesty, you're going to feel right at home. And I can imagine you'd slip into a comfortable gameplay experience quite easily, especially more so than what I did. So Apex didn't quite work the way we hoped in terms of controls. However, one thing you will have noticed about our game selection is a lot of these games are fairly, I guess, graphically intense. Of course, this was done to stress the hardware as much as we could and see what type of performance we could actually get out of it, because retro 2D shooters and budget indie titles would clearly be a breeze. Now, for the most part, we were getting pretty impressive results, with the performance of the Core HS matching what we saw on our Steam Deck. But with a higher resolution screen, this means we're seeing, I guess, similar performance while having games that look a lot better. And with the size of the screen, the pixel density made everything look super crisp and clear. And it was genuinely impressive with how good Forza 5 can look on low settings at 1080p. Playing the game was similarly impressive. It ran at a consistent 60 FPS the whole time while we were playing, input latency was tight, the controller felt responsive and comfortable, and overall it was really easy to hit the apex on corners and easy acceleration when doing races. I didn't miss any checkpoints and I managed to get first place in the first race I attempted. So all in all, thumbs up, as it seems to work well for this type of game. And that was kind of where my head was in the first place, thinking that a device like this would be best suited for racing games. It just, I don't know, seems to make the most sense. Do you agree with that? Now, the next game we tried was Monster Hunter World. This was very much Brandon's choice, and he's the one with knowledge on it, so I'm taking kind of his word here. According to him, using the core HS for Monster Hunter was effortless, and getting used to the controller here clicked pretty quickly. So he was quickly hunting with, well, relative ease. The buttons, from what I'm told, in this game felt snappy and responsive when trying to time dodge, which is a very key part of the game. And after a good amount of time in the game, you almost forget you're actually playing on a small handheld device. So Monster Hunter is, I guess, another win here, but with one, let's say, big caveat, and that comes down to the extra shoulder buttons. By default, these are mapped to device functions like opening the keyboard or showing the desktop, but the rebinding options lack the ability to use them like other buttons. And Monster Hunter is the prime example of how I guess this could be a bit of a game changer. To give, I guess, a little bit of context, and again, I'm trying to phrase this in a way that Brandon has told me and I'm trying to pass on to you because I never actually played Monster Hunter. But to give a little context, in Monster Hunter you have your item wheel and you have to scroll through this with a D-pad to select the item that you then use with the X button. But the issue with this is if you're trying to select healing items in the middle of a fight, you're met with two options that are, I guess, equally unappealing. Hopefully that makes sense. Either you stop being able to move around and avoid attacks while you move your thumb to press left and right to select the items, or you have to assume the position of what's being referred to, and yes, I did double check this, as the Monster Hunter Claw, which is an incredibly uncomfortable and borderline painful method of holding the controller that allows you to move and select items at the same time, unless your controller has mappable buttons that can be pressed without moving your thumb away from the analog sticks. I'm sure everyone who's played Monster Hunter right now is going, yes, I know exactly what you mean. Everyone else is just going, no, I'm with you, Andy, not got a clue. So hopefully I've done that kind of explanation justice. Like the shoulder buttons here, it would be nice to simply map them to left and right as you would have a much more comfortable experience. But there isn't an option to bind these buttons as any of the other controller functions, which means we're stuck with the claw, which isn't ideal. Thankfully though, this change could easily come in the form of a software update. And if anyone at IONEO or Antec is watching, please add that option ASAP, because Brandon's been shouting it to me pretty much since we got it in. But yeah, that is kind of game specific, but also I'm guessing that translates to a lot of other games. Now next up is Elden Ring and Lords of the Fallen. I'm going to group them as they are both Souls-like games and feature very similar playstyles. For this, I don't really have much to say as it works pretty much perfectly. Everything felt good and I really don't have any complaints. So yeah, that's a nice and easy one. This type of hardware works so well for Souls-like games and just feels natural to play. But because of the size of the screen, you may find smaller hidden details or items just that little bit harder to spot. So bear that in mind, though using the dock and a big display would obviously negate that, or you could just decrease the resolution, which may help a little bit. Overall, I'd expect, I guess, a similar experience for any third-person type of adventure game too. So just be warned that you may need to, I guess, look a little bit harder if you're running it at 1080 natively without the dock. Now, the next big game that we tried was Ratchet & Clank, a 3D adventure game built with controllers in mind, and surprisingly well suited to the smaller screen with its bright and vibrant graphics. Due to the type of game and its graphics, it was very easily playable in portable format, and with the support of FSR 3, we were able to boost our performance and our frame rate. Though, as we are, I guess, natively at 1080p, that's what it's displaying at, we are then being upscaled, and that made things look, well, frankly awful. So I'd actually advise staying away from using FSR 3. Maybe in the future when we get higher resolution models of this, it will make more sense, but at 1080, yeah, it's just awful. Now, moving on, and Blasphemous was the last game. And while this is actually the only 2D game we tried, as from what we've seen, all these types of games run very smoothly on the core HS. But it's also where I think devices like this really shine the most. I also think that these types of products complement the indie game scene so well that it's, I don't know, just not worth promoting AAA games for them. Though obviously, as we've demonstrated, you can still play them quite well. But older titles would just feel and play better. And for one major reason. The lower power requirements required to run these games smoothly is a big win, meaning you can play for longer, which is of course what we all want to do. This game was even one of the featured titles that Antec demonstrated at Computex, and it makes sense as this game not only requires lots of precise timing, but also quite a bit of precision platforming, which was easy enough thanks to the great quality of the Hall effect triggers and the analog sticks. Now, another thing that works so well for these types of games, and I guess all of the games that we tested for that matter, is that this is a Windows 11 based system. So you can play any of your Steam games on it, which is really nice because of the cloud save feature. And with cloud save, you can go from playing the game on your PC to then on a train, a bus, plane, or anywhere else for that matter with ease. And you just pick up where you left off. Of course, and without meaning to sound like a broken record, it's a Windows 11 based system. So, other gaming platform installers and dare I say emulation are obviously all on the table here, but I don't condone that. I don't think I can say that. So yeah, I don't condone it. Don't do it. Now while playing, I will be 100% truthful and say that it gets warm, but thanks to its triple copper tube cooling system, temperatures are kept at bay. The fan does kick in quite dramatically while gaming, but I'd like to think that you'd be listening to the game. So I guess it's not really going to cause too much of an issue. A bit like with a desktop PC. It can be a little bit louder when you're gaming because you're going to have headphones on. Now, speaking of listening, the speakers are, well, fine. Antec claims them to be dual-channel speakers with built-in intelligent amplifier algorithms, which delivers powerful immersive audio for intense gaming sessions. And honestly, I just don't buy it that much. For the type of device it is, as I said, fine, but it definitely lacks bass. But I also wouldn't expect anything different. The best way to describe the audio is that it sounds comparable to a mobile phone from a few years ago. It's clear, but it just lacks bass in the low-end frequency. When compared to the likes of the Steam Deck, which is, I guess, our biggest basis for comparison, it's certainly worse. But due to the sheer size of the Steam Deck being so much bigger, I'd quite happily take that hit for a smaller unit. As, like I said, you're going to be using headphones while gaming anyway, so it's a bit of a non-issue. Now, the big selling point for the Core HS really is going to come down to it having Windows 11. And I know I keep saying it, but having that as standard. And while you'd expect a device like this to cost more with it having Windows pre-installed because you have to pay for the license, the pricing is actually very competitive. And I guess somewhat surprising because we've been told the price many different times, but this is the final price. Now, if you're in the UK, it's going to cost you £549. But for that, you're getting the complete bundle of the device, screen protector, joystick caps, docking station, and the carry case. If you're in mainland Europe, you'll get the same bundle for €699, and then in the US, it's the same again for $699. And that to me is actually extremely good value considering the whole package that you get. Now, the other cool thing is that you have an app pre-installed called iSpace. This is essentially a hub for all things for the Core HS, which essentially has two elements to it. The first is the main application, which acts a bit like a launcher, showing you what games you have installed, along with showing various options, including that for data modification or cloud data. You also get a whole host of options for configuring general settings and changing power modes to get more performance while sacrificing battery life. Now, if you're near a charger or you know how long you're going to be gaming and want the best experience, then you'll have that option. While on the flip side, you may look at changing the mode to save on power, which will give you less performance, but you'll get a much improved battery life for those longer trips. You can also map different buttons and triggers depending on your use, increase the VRAM size, enable and adjust RGB, though again, this will affect battery life somewhat, and as I mentioned earlier, the triggers aren't, I guess, fully open to what you actually want to be able to do. Now, the big one for me within the software is the monitor setting, which allows you to view hardware values for your load, your frequency, your wattage, RAM usage, and temperatures, all thanks to Riva Tuner. And as you'd expect, this can be tweaked to your needs as to how you want it to look, whether that be vertically, horizontally, or to just display the relevant simple information, which I think is what most people are going to have at most times if they're going to have it on at all. Now, while this is good if you're tinkering around, it's not easy if you're in game. But they thought about that too, and that is the second part. There's a button that takes you to an overlay, which gives you a lot of the information from the iSpace app, including battery life, the ability to enable or disable the overlay, increase FPS and thermal limits, and changing the performance mode. You can also, again, map different controls within the realms that I've already spoke about, change the brightness and volume levels, and use the Quick Assistant for simple tasks. And this overlay works at, well, any time. And thankfully, even though it's a quick kind of access button, I've not accidentally pressed it at all, which is great because other similar devices I've struggled with accidental kind of presses of the buttons. It's then taking you into somewhere completely different, and I guess it just ruins the whole gameplay experience. So, what is my general take on it? Well, overall, Antec has taken a well-loved system and brought it to a new market, and that makes sense, as the market for mobile PC gaming is booming right now, and the real winners will be those who want to get a mixture of mobile and desktop gaming while also not spending over the odds. And to me at least, the Core HS does exactly that. This is a desktop PC in mobile form factor. Now, I will be, again, completely 100% honest, I do have some gripes. But in all honesty, they're actually quite simple gripes, and that comes down to Antec selling themselves a little short. Things like the Hall effect triggers and analog sticks aren't even mentioned on the retail packaging. And to me, these are really, really big selling points and something that I think needs to be highlighted a little bit better. That aside, they have made some extremely clever moves, like dropping to 60Hz versus 90Hz on the Steam Deck. That's a smart move, as it allows them to bump the resolution to full HD, which I think is a better use of a mobile GPU package such as this. Though one thing I will say is straight away to disable the auto rotation feature as well, it does get very, very tiresome very, very quickly. One thing I will say is much like laptops and other mobile devices, this platform will mature with newer components. And I think as we see more power coming by way of the CPU and the onboard GPU, I think we will inevitably see higher refresh rates in time, as well as larger resolutions, so long as it can be balanced with good battery life. And that's the big decision that Antec made here. And in all honesty, it is a wise one that I think will pay off when comparing it to the competition, especially along with the inclusion of Windows 11 too. So bold moves, but I think it's ones that should, in theory, pay off. What we essentially have here is a somewhat retro design. I'm sure you'd agree with that. Premium quality controls, albeit with some improvements could be made to remapping those extra back buttons, a good quality screen, excellent gaming performance, native, I'm going to say it again, Windows 11 OS, and even some upgrade options in terms of storage. And all of that together makes this one of the more, I guess, well-rounded devices on the market. While I could argue something like the Steam Deck has more features, it's also more of a closed system and much larger and slightly heavier device too. While the Core HS feels a little closer to something like the Nintendo Switch when it comes to mobile PC gaming. And in all honesty, I love it. And the fact that it has Windows 11. I can't stop saying that. So yeah, that's going to wrap this one up. A bit different from our normal type of content, but ever since I heard about this, I wanted to get my hands on it and kind of see what it was all about. And while it's not perfect, with a little configurating kind of here and there, I think it's safe to say that there's a new contender on the market. And now, MSI, ASUS, and some of the other devices on the market are going to have to now catch up. So what do you think of the Core HS? Myself, and I'm sure Antec would love to know, what colour would you get it in? The black or the white? And what would be the first game that you actually play on it? Also, being a Windows 11 device, if you hadn't realised that thus far, you do have full flexibility over what you do on it. So while it is a gaming device, there's nothing stopping you watching movies on it, doing work on it, and so much more. So would you use it for that? Or would you purely kind of be using it for gaming? Let me know in the comments section below. For now, that's gonna, I guess, yeah, about do it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. And if you love what we do, then you can help support us over on Patreon, where you get access to a ton of cool and exclusive benefits, including behind the scenes content, bi-weekly game nights, access to our testing data, and much, much more. The link is, as always, down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye. By the way, I don't know if you've seen, this is Windows 11. I don't know if I mentioned that. Windows 11.